Welcome to Mentoring for Growth and Change, Navigating Professional Transitions. This is brought to you by the University of Chicago, Graham School of Continuing Liberal and Professional Studies, and I hope I got the name right. I'm Laurie Schulter-Carroll. I'm the chair of the Mentoring Committee. We have 7 members. We're one of 3 committees that are working with this year's Professional Development Program Student Advisory Board, which is done as an acronym that I can't say either. Also online tonight from my group is Mary Mcgorry, who is one of our committee members, and she's been instrumental in putting this program together. And also Carrie Armbruster, who's the program manager for professional development programs. There are going to be 3 speakers tonight: Tina Owen Moore, Don Harding, and Maria Gronowski. I'm hoping I pronounced that correctly. We ask if you come on to listen to this that you mute yourself, as ambient background noise can be really distracting during these webinars. I will introduce Tina, and then Mary will introduce the other 2 speakers. Each of our 3 speakers will have the opportunity to offer their thoughts on mentoring, their roles in mentoring, and the positive changes that they've seen and outcomes for mentoring for both career growth and professional change. We have a list of questions that we'll be asking the speakers. If you have a question, please type it into the chat box, and Carrie will bring your question forward before the next question so that we can make sure we answer any participants' questions during the webinar. I'd like to introduce Tina, who's sitting right next to me. She currently works with me. I'm very proud of that. She's she works at Chicago International Charter Schools as our Chief People Officer. In that role, she works to attract, hire, recruit, develop, and retain both network staff as well as instructors and staff at each of our charter schools. She brings her experience as the founder and principal at the Alliance School of Milwaukee, a school where, and I'm going to read this in her words, "Bullying is not a norm, and where all students feel safe and accepted for who they are." She has also been a teacher at Milwaukee Public Schools. She graduated with a Doctor of Education Leadership from Harvard Graduate School of Education, while simultaneously writing and publishing her book, The Alliance Way: The Making of a Bully-Free School. Mary?
My name is Dr. Mary Mcgorry, and I'm pleased to introduce first Mr. Donald Harding, MA, MS, ELSC, CHCP. Don is the president of Harding Communications in Downingtown, Pennsylvania. Don graduated from Harvard College in 1978 with a Bachelor in Liberal Arts. Don pursued a career in journalism, advancing from small to mid-sized newspapers and winning prizes for investigative and public service journalism. Don received his first master's degree in journalism from the prestigious Newhouse School of Journalism at Syracuse University in 1992. As Don observed the decline in the U.S. newspaper industry, he transitioned into medical writing. Don achieved certification from the American Medical Writers Association and was board certified by the Editors in the Life Sciences in 2008. Don recently completed a second master's degree in biology from Westchester University. Don owns his own freelance continuing medical education company with special expertise in complex oncology topics. Don teaches and speaks regionally and nationally on topics in CME best practices. Don's master's thesis emphasized the value of mentorship in professional life sciences education and training. Don possesses additional accreditation as a certified healthcare continuing professional development professional. Don, thank you for joining our webinar and sharing your expertise. Our next speaker is Dr. Maria Gronowski. Maria is a freelance content writer and strategist for businesses in complex industries like law, science, and engineering. Dr. Gronowski is also the co-founder of WriteandProsper.com, a website dedicated to helping new and early stage medical writers grow a sustainable business through coaching and online courses. In her former life, Maria was a patent litigator, representing clients in a variety of innovative industries, including pharmaceuticals, biotech, telecom, and semiconductors. Dr. Maria Gronowski holds a PhD in medical and molecular genetics from the University of Toronto and a Juris Doctor from Georgetown University Law Center. Maria is also a Harvard-trained negotiator and certified mediator. Maria, we welcome your expertise in mentorship and its role in career change. Welcome, Dr. Gronowski and Mr. Don Harding. Back to you, Laurie.
Okay, we're going to first start off with the very first question. Each of you is welcome to answer this question. I'm sorry, I'm so sorry. What I want to do first is have Tina talk about herself, how she came to be a mentor, her experiences being a mentor, and any thoughts she has about mentorship.
Yeah, well, thank you for this opportunity to share. I haven't thought of myself much as a mentor at all over the years. It's kind of funny. It's something that I do and have always done, but have never really thought of myself in a role. Over the years, I've mentored lots of people as they've started up schools, or they've been trying to think about how to make schools bully free, things like that. And so it's just something that comes from this space of wanting to help people to do the things that I'm passionate about also. More recently, I have been doing executive coaching work, which is kind of in the mentoring space also, with a little bit of a different take. I've learned a lot about the immunity to change approach to helping people overcome their obstacles towards improvement. And I've been doing coaching in that space and really enjoying seeing people have the aha moments that can help them to bring their best selves to work. So yeah, I think it's part of who I am, not necessarily part of what I do always, but just who I am as a person.
Next, we're going to ask Don to give his thoughts on mentorship, career change, and his role in that.
Okay, sure. I'm happy to. I've set a timer to limit myself to 3 minutes. If I get too long-winded, somebody please raise their hand. So hi, I'm speaking to you from my home office in Downingtown, Pennsylvania, outside of Philadelphia. And one of the reasons why I accepted this invitation was the mentorship concept. And I want to tell you a very brief story about why mentorship is very high on my radar right now. As Mary said earlier, I just finished my second master's degree. This one was in biology. And for my master's thesis, I picked a topic that I knew would be near and dear to the heart of my advisor, which was the case study method and how to use the case study method in the life science classroom. But the research method I got to pick was my favorite method, which is the Delphi method. I don't know if anybody's ever heard of the Delphi method, but it's a great way to forge consensus among a group of experts. That group may be 30 people or 300 people, but I had never used the Delphi method, and I wanted to get my hands dirty using the Delphi method. It's widely used in the health sciences. So the Reader's Digest version, cutting to the chase here, I presented my Delphi panel with 10 different ways that they might be able to better use the case study method in the life science classroom. And I asked them to rank them. And then I asked them to rank them again and again and again. And we went through this consensus process iteratively over and over. And as you might guess, by the end, the top vote getter from all the experts on the panel and how to best teach professors how to use the case study method in the life science classroom was by using a mentor. Everybody agreed that a mentor would be better than attending a conference. It would be better than reading an article. It would be better than watching a video. It would be better. I can't remember all the other alternatives that I gave them. But what I do remember is that there was just general consensus that the mentor was going to be the most effective way to teach an old dog new tricks, essentially. And can everybody hear me? Is there any problem with technical or anything?
No, Don, we're hearing you terrifically, and please don't limit yourself to the time, because we've made time. we want to hear everything you all have to say because you're also great.
There's just one other connection in which this topic is very germane, and that is within the medical writing profession right now, there's a great deal of interest in training the next generation of medical writers. And there's a great interest in the topic of apprenticeship, the whole concept of apprenticeship, because many people see medical writing as, in addition to being a profession, also being a highly skilled craft. And there's general recognition that you don't learn a craft overnight. It needs to be honed and developed over a period of months or years. And so there's this idea of developing apprenticeships for medical writers is of some currency right now and of some interest to me for various reasons I won't go into because I've run out of time. But I think it's pretty clear that if anyone is going to set up an apprenticeship program, they're going to need to pair that apprentice with some sort of a senior veteran master skilled individual. Let's call that person a mentor. And presumably, in order to have a successful mentoring or apprentice relationship, there needs to be some time and care given to how to set up those, they call them dyads, couplings or pairings between apprentices and masters or mentors and mentees. So, and the reason why this is of such great interest to me right now is because the state of Pennsylvania has a grant, a call for grant applications open for setting up apprenticeships in non-traditional trades, or not even trades, but professions such as healthcare, information technology, manufacturing, and biomedical research. So it's not a far stretch to go from there to medical writing. So I think I'm probably done with my time, and thank you very much for your attention.
Great.
And Dr. Gronowski, if you could give us your thoughts on mentorship and career change and its role in your life.
Sure, I will do that, but only if you call me Maria from now on. I am going to talk to you a little bit about my own career changes, because I've done 2 of those, and what I have thought about in terms of how I have experienced mentorship as a mentee and what I try to bring to my mentorship relationships going forward. So the first thing I would say is that a good mentor will bias you towards action. And that's, to me, is the difference between a teacher, sometimes even a great teacher, a professor, and a mentor. A mentor will actually push you to do stuff and to fall flat on your face, and then they'll help you get up. They will analyze with you what went wrong, what went right. They will encourage you when you feel like not taking that leap. And that, to me, is why mentorship is so incredibly valuable. I think the problem for a lot of us who are way too pedigreed and way too degreed is that that is our bias, right? Our bias is to learn. We need to learn more. We need to read yet another book. We need to maybe attend another conference, maybe take another course. Did I mention another course, etc.? But that is not the way you end up actually moving forward. Like, at the end of the day, you have to get your hands dirty, you have to fail. And a good mentor creates a safe space for you and the expectation that maybe things aren't going to go perfectly, but you will survive. And I've had those experiences twice. As I said, for one thing, I went from being a scientist to being a lawyer. And then I went from being a lawyer to being a freelance writer. And in both of those situations, the people who really stuck out as my best mentors were the ones who said, yeah, get on with it, right? Literally, sometimes literally in those words. Because I always have an excuse. I always am not ready. There's always some reason why I can't pick up the phone and maybe call a potential client, or, for example. if it's a marketing issue. Maybe I'm not ready to take a deposition and I haven't been for 6 months or 8 months or 10 months. And finally somebody says, get on with it. So that to me is really the biggest value of a good mentor. The other thing that I would say, and I've experienced this myself, again, in both contexts, is that you kind of have to be prepared in today's world to be mentored by younger people. And that can be a shock to the system. Really, it can be. And so when I went to law school, right, I mean, I didn't do the usual undergrad law school law firm, right? I actually took the detour into science and I got my PhD, I did a postdoc, and then I went to law school, which means that when I came into a law firm, I was, in some cases, maybe 10 years older than my superiors, right? And what I've noticed is that, and I definitely don't want to generalize, but it seemed like women tended to be more okay with that than men. I don't know if that's more of a hierarchical thing, but I've seen these really, really hard clashes between men and their superiors who are younger than them, whereas women tended to be, okay, well, I kind of understand the hierarchy of this situation and I will be okay with it. One of my best mentors, and to this day, she's a really good friend. She is literally a decade younger than I am, but she was a fantastic lawyer. She taught me how to take depositions. She taught me how to do all these litigation things that no law school is teaching you. And I am very, very grateful to her. Similarly, when I transitioned to freelance writing, and now there's this whole world of marketing that I never had to deal with, et cetera. If I want to run Facebook ads or I want to build a website, frankly, these are going to be 30-year-olds or 20-year-olds who know how to do this, and I don't. And you need to be okay with it. So I think in that sense, that is something that is changing, especially, and I think it's changing even more rapidly now because the world is moving away from the status of degrees. I mean, degrees still have a lot of status, but there are so many other ways to learn these days. And so that world order that we've grown up with is crumbling a little bit. And then the third way, and I will actually, let other people speak, is sometimes mentorship is not free. And sometimes that's okay. Because as I said, like just today, I'm just coming off a workshop on public speaking. And it was an absolutely fabulous workshop. And I met a lot of people who I can see going forward will be mentors for one reason or another. But that workshop itself gave me a new worldview and a new idea about maybe how to move my business forward, et cetera. That was a $5,000 investment, right? And so in some ways, I think, as I said, like that whole concept of what education is and what mentorship is, I think they're all morphing and changing. And there needs to be some understanding of, if you're going to be, if mentoring is the way you want to help other people succeed, potentially you do need to charge them for that time that you're going to be spending with them. As long as you provide that huge value, I think that's something that we should be okay with.
Thank you, Maria. I know we have some questions from our committee, and our chairwoman, Laurie Schulter-Corral, is going to start.
I have to keep laughing because I rarely hear my last name spoken, and I think to myself, who is that? The first question is rather easy, but there's some complexity to it, which is what inspired you to become a mentor? And by inspiration is, for myself, I have always mentored. It's part of my DNA. And so I have been a mentor to people because what I'm very good at in the role I've played for the last 16, 17 years is as an executive assistant, I facilitate other people. So the mentorship easily falls into what I do because I train other people to do things. I help other people get to the space they want to. And my joke is always is my last 3 bosses have quit to go on to other careers. So I'm really good at mentoring people out of the position they're in into someplace else. But I'd like to open it up to our 3 presenters as to what motivated you, what was your inspiration for becoming a mentor? And any of you could answer, you can talk, you could even talk between yourselves. Don't feel like it has to be a one-person answer.
Why don't we start with Tina, and we can ask Don and Maria each to contribute. We have the blessing of time here, so I think we can really learn from our presenters.
This is great. I will tell you that my first, my introduction to mentoring was just a terrible experience. It makes me blush to think about it. So I was young, I was a teen mother, and there was this program that the city provided that matched teen parents with a mentor. And so this was somebody I didn't know. I don't know how they did the matching process, but I know that after having a phone conversation, she invited me to lunch. And I was very poor and did not know what that meant to be asked to lunch, but I didn't want to say no. And I was eager to have a mentor, and I went. And then when I got there, she expected me to pay for my meal. And I was so embarrassed because I didn't have it. And it was just, it made me run away from both mentoring and being mentored for a long time. As I got older, I started wanting to make sure that I could give the kind of mentoring experiences that I needed at that time, you know, to really recognize where people are at. And if you're going to be a host all the way, and like be really responsive to people's needs. So I think I stepped into mentoring from that perspective of making sure that other people didn't have those kinds of experiences. In the executive coaching space, I had an executive coach in my doctoral program, and I had never even heard of executive coaching. And she was the one that really gave me the push to write my book. I was afraid to write a book about the work that we had done as a school because it wasn't just my work. I hadn't done it all by myself, and I didn't want to receive that credit for work that had belonged to everybody. And so she really pushed me to go back and ask people, well, have you talked to people? Have you asked them what they thought? Do they want you to write the book? And so I went back and asked, and everybody said, you have to write the book. Like, you're the only person who could write this book. You have to write it. And it opened up so many doors of possibilities for me and really gave me the opportunity to affect others. So now in that executive coaching space, I love being that person who can ask the question that you wouldn't think to ask yourself. That's what mentoring is for me, and that's when I've seen it be really powerful, is when you can ask the question that the person would never ask themselves. I love doing that.
For me, what inspired you to be, oh, sorry, Maria. What inspired you to be a mentor, Maria?
For me, I think I kind of fell into it. I mostly fell into it through writing. So, because I was seen as someone who writes well. Other associates at the firm started coming to me, and partners started sending associates my way to like to fix how other associates wrote. And that's when I started thinking that, oh, I apparently, you know, I'm helping them. And then kind of became something of an agony aunt, because, you know, once associates have told you one problem, then they tend to tell you another problem, etc. And, you know, there's something really human about helping somebody else, really. It makes you feel good. And that's just it. To me, it's almost like an addictive feeling of like, oh, I can actually help another person. I can help another person. And to me, there's nothing better than seeing someone flourish, right? I never think of other people as being competition. I don't really, even if we're working in the same space, there's plenty of work to go around. There's plenty of nuances around. And it's just a really nice feeling to know that you've done good for someone. It's simple as that.
Don, what inspired you to be a mentor?
Oh, sound is.
Sorry about that. I was muted. Sorry about that. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Don, what inspired you to be a mentor?
Let me start over. So I was nodding my head as I was listening to Maria. Yes, it does feel wonderful to be able to help someone else. My wife says I have a natural gift for teaching. I miss my calling as a teacher. I do enjoy teaching. I find myself writing to extend my reach as a mentor. I can extend it through writing. You can reach many more people through writing. You can distribute that writing to many other people, and if you can find a way to get it to the right reader at the right time, you can help a lot of people that way, more than you can help, in a one-on-one. And there's certainly a time and a place for one-on-one mentoring. But heck, why not? If it feels good to help one person in person, why not help 100 people in writing? So that's kind of how I feel about when I write this guide to writing in the CME space that people have been saying they love, and to Maria's point, it feels great to hear these people saying, "Wow, I can't get this anywhere else. This is really terrific information, and thank you so much for writing it." And it is a wonderful feeling. It's a feeling of satisfaction to make that connection with the reader. To be honest with you, up until Mary invited me for this talk, I hadn't really thought of myself as a mentor. I'd be curious to hear, Mary, what was it that made you think I was a mentor? I realized that you came to that workshop, that AMWA workshop in Princeton, and we certainly hit it off. And I ran a couple of a small group there. It was a writer's workshop that I got a kick out of, and it seemed like everybody in the workshop really got a big kick out of it. That's just kind of my idea of a good time, is to have a writing workshop. So,
well, honestly, Don, it really was that you were such a leader to so many people, and the people in that workshop were people like myself who'd had fully established careers and youthful people just getting started. And it was very clear to me that you enjoyed mentoring others, and you were incredibly generous, as was your counterpart, and in the time and the knowledge that you shared with us. So that was really why you came to mind when Laurie had this very interesting approach about evidence-based study on mentorship and how it can be useful and meaningful. I'm going to take this moment because to move on to question 2. And I think I'm just going to ask each speaker to direct their answers because we're learning so much. So I think I'll direct this to Dr. Tina Marie Owens. In your opinion, what are some of the benefits of working with a career mentor? You gave a very poignant example, and I'm very moved by that, about how a mentor really was had missed the consideration aspect. What are the benefits when you have worked with a career mentor that have assisted you, Dr. Owens?
Yeah, I think having somebody reflect back to me what I'm saying or thinking gives me a new lens to consider. Is that the truth? Is that what I really think? A lot of times when we're thinking out loud or we're questioning things, it just pushes it back to us. What's the evidence for that? Like, is that real, or is that your own fears? Is that something that is that a message from childhood? Is that something that that comes from a past experience? Like, where's that really coming from? And giving that kind of objective perspective to the thoughts that I'm having or the things that I'm saying. So I love having that person kind of push that back to me. And then also having a career mentor tends to push you against the I can'ts or that wouldn't happen, and give you the sense of, well, what's the worst thing that could happen? If it didn't work out, you'd be fine. So why not try? It's that kind of gives you that little hopeful push to try things that you may not try, or do things in ways that you might not consider. And also to see yourself as the world really sees you, instead of how you tend to think that the world sees you.
That's a very relevant comment. Maria, what do you believe the benefits are of working with a career mentor?
So to me, I think a lot of it is having someone who can see around corners. So someone who has been there before. It doesn't necessarily mean that that person needs to be, if you're a medical writer, the other person needs to be a medical writer. But if they've started their own business, if you want to be a freelancer, for example, or if they've been working in a particular system to which you're going, etc. It's really helpful to have that person who is a few steps ahead, who still remembers what it's like to be where you are right now, but can also see the future. And once, as Tina said, once they've reached that particular stage, they can now see a broader opportunity, right? And so sometimes we don't even see the opportunities that are, 2 or 3 steps ahead of us. And a good mentor can really expand your world, really. They can really say to you, if you try, let's say, speaking, or if you wrote the book, or if you wrote that article, your world will expand. You will have these extra opportunities. So that's one side. And the other side, again, is that push. It's that bias for action. It's the fact that they're not going to let you sit there and hide behind, I don't know enough and I can't.
Thanks a lot, Maria. That's really a terrific perspective. Don, what do you believe are the benefits of working with a career mentor? Don, you're muted, just to let you know.
That's a tough one, Mary. I have to be careful. I have had a couple of career mentors. One in particular, I'm thinking her name is Karen, and I have to agree that with Maria that a good mentor can really expand your horizons, expand your world. She taught a workshop at the MWA Princeton Forum on avoiding commercial bias in continuing medical education. And it was the first time I'd ever even heard about CME or the whole world of accredited CME. And she just opened it all up for us. And she used a case-based approach, which at the time I didn't realize how powerful the case-based approach was and for teaching adults. And I think she just kind of opened up a whole world of possibilities for me. And now as I stay in touch with Karen, we talk occasionally. I run ideas by her. She, tells me, what she thinks about them. And it's one of the things that I admire about Karen is that she shares her expertise not just in one-on-one, but she helped to update the certification exam. I happen to believe in the value of certification, professional certification, and I'm hoping we have a chance to talk about this a little bit later on, because I happen to see professional certification as kind of an institutionalized, structured mentor system where there are some people who presumably are further along in the profession than you are, who are kind of setting these standards that if you do these things and pass these tests, then you will be positioned for success moving forward in this particular career. But my mentor, Karen, happens to serve on this certification exam in the profession in which I work, the continuing education in the health profession. And she updated the curriculum. She originally essentially wrote the content outline 12 years ago. And then when it became dated, she went to the trouble of updating it and keeping it current so that it didn't go stale. And that takes a lot of work, and that takes a lot of time, and it takes a lot of dedication. And so that's one of the things that I admire about her. And I think in that way, she kind of sets a standard. It's like, oh my gosh, if Karen can do this for the profession, if Karen can put all this time in, this unpaid time, this volunteer time, this kind of benevolent work for the sake of the profession, why can't I do just, a little bit, because she kind of leads by example. And so I think that's a way that, staying in touch with Karen over the years has helped me to kind of raise my sights in terms of, well, what is professionalism in this field, and to, kind of keep striving for more. I don't know if that answers your question.
Oh, it definitely does. Thank you, Don. I'm going to turn it back to Chairwoman Laurie Schulte-Corral.
Just use Laurie from now on.
Laurie, it's such a cool name. I just feel like I got to roll it up there. Okay, sorry, Laurie.
The next thing we're going to talk about is, in us setting up our program at the Graham Center, we're thinking about how we would start the process. And one of the questions that one of the team members suggested was, is it better for mentors and mentees to have similar learning and relating styles, or is it better to mix it up? And several of you have talked about this push towards action. And I know within myself that I have come to online learning very slowly. I know what I am comfortable with. I know what I want. And pushing me into online learning has given me a whole new set of skills. But I did not come there with any ease. So let's start with Marie. Can you talk a little about what you think of the combination of mentors and mentees styles?
So I think that having the right fit is important, because partly because you need to have trust, and it's really hard to develop trust with someone that you just don't mesh with, right? So I don't necessarily know if it's different styles, but I certainly have the experience where I've paid for coaching and started working with someone who was highly recommended, and I had that first call with them and they were awesome and I thought this was great. And then it was like oil and water. They were saying things, and I'm sure they are very good at what they do, and it was just not penetrating. Like there was just something that I couldn't understand almost what they were trying to make me do. Or if they were trying to make me do this thing, I just couldn't bring myself to do it. It was just this very odd feeling like I'm kind of walking through a fog and I don't understand why. On the other hand, I've had other experiences where, it was like a mind meld, right? It's like, exactly what that person is telling you to do. You understand why. These people direct you exactly. You're working towards a common goal, and that feeling is really powerful. It really does feel like your coach or your mentor is amplifying your efforts. So it's not just you swimming against the current, it's that coach pushing you, and suddenly you're there twice as fast. So you do, in that world of mentorship, coaching, etc., it is important to find the right fit. And it's not, I think sometimes you can have a conversation an hour, and kind of go, no, this person is not for me. I know this. Sometimes, unfortunately, it's not quite so easy to see. But, you've been exposed to another style. You've learned something new. You're getting some new information and a new way of thinking about it. And sometimes there's value in saying, no, this style is not for me.
And Don?
I would agree with Maria on the idea that the fit is important, and that similar styles, similar expectations are important. And I want to echo what you said about the trust. I'm really glad that that you brought up the idea of the concept of trust there, Maria, because I think trust is really important. That the mentor has to trust the mentee, and the mentee has to trust the mentor. Having said that, trust doesn't just kind of happen. Trust develops, you know, a little at a time as promises are kept. Little promises lead to medium-sized promises, lead to big promises that are kept over time. So I would say similar styles are important, but it kind of may take a while to figure that out. It may take you know, a first date and then a second date and then a third date to decide whether you really are compatible or not. So
I'm going to push back on this one a little bit and say that I think that different styles are better, because I think that it gives the push. Like when there's a different style, you get the push that you need. So you're not always seeing things from the same lens. But I do agree that there has to be that mesh, that match. And I think that comes from having really highly trained mentors, like having really good, making sure that people are there to be mentors. I think some people want to be sages, not mentors. And that's a very different thing. And it's hard for anybody to respond to that kind of what is perceived as mentoring, but doesn't always come across as mentoring. So I think having somebody who's really well trained in coaching questions and what it means to be a mentor, and having really clear guidelines for what that mentoring relationship will look like at the beginning, can make it possible for people who come from very different backgrounds, very different styles, to really have a great relationship and be able to push each other in ways that can help both people move forward in powerful ways.
Interesting. And it's interesting to me that that I'm not sure where I lie with that, but I do know that the idea of trust is the foundation for good mentoring.
Yeah.
So how you get there and what you have, I think, is the most important thing, is that you build a level of trust with each other. Mary, you want to take the next question?
Sure, Laurie, thank you. And I think those were really, really wise comments from all of our speakers. Actually, I'm going to start with Maria. Maria, you actually addressed this a little bit in your first opening remarks. Is age a factor in the mentor-mentee relationship?
It certainly can be. It's a question of, on both sides, right? So obviously, if you're coming across people who refer to anyone who's 40 and above as the olds, chances are they're not going to be good mentors for you. But and the other side of it is, if you're the mentee and you're older, and you kind of need to leave your ego by the door, right? And that can be really difficult to do. But as I said, I think in today's world, you really would be, you may be shortchanging yourself if you're just going to look at someone who's older to be your mentor, because especially if you're looking at issues relating to technology, there are a lot of younger people who have a lot of expertise, and they're doing things that you may want to be doing and don't know how. So to my mind, it's, for lack of a better term, just suck it up and find the right mentor for the situation you're in, right? And especially, as I said, especially if this is your second career or third career, you're a novice. I hate to break it to you, but in some ways, you are going to be a novice. And even if you're actually doing the same thing as you did in the corporate world, but you're going out on your own, you're a novice marketer. You've never had to sell yourself, right? That is a new experience. So I would go with finding the right person, the person who can push you to do the right things, and the person that you can develop trust with, etc. And I would really really strongly recommend that you don't think about their age.
Thanks, Maria. Don, what are your thoughts about age as a factor in the mentor and mentee relationship?
Well, in a mentor relationship that I find myself in right now, age is crucial because I just was part of a leadership development group for studying a book where the author of the book strongly encouraged the boomers in the group to seek out the millennials, and the millennials to seek out the boomers, to try to make this intergenerational connection and try to learn from each other. And so on the strength of that, you know how sometimes you read something in a book and you say, I think I'm going to try that. You know, I'll reach out to millennials. So a millennial crossed paths, and I crossed paths. He read my book. I read a booklet, I should say, on getting started in CME writing. And so now we're working together. And I think at this point, the age difference is crucial, partially because I sought him out so that I could learn from him, and he's kind of sought me out so he could learn from me. And I think we're kind of recognizing that there's an intergenerational difference here that we're both trying to kind of take advantage of. He's looking to me for my experience. I'm looking to him for his tech savvy. And so far it's been a mutually beneficial arrangement. And we'll see how it goes.
That's an excellent example, Don. Thank you. And Dr. Owens, what is your thought about age in the mentor-mentee relationship?
Yeah, it's an interesting question to think about. I think about Maria, you talked about having been in classes and having been older sometimes, and so the age differential wasn't there, like as much as the experience wasn't connected to that. That brought me back to my undergrad program too, where I was already a mom, and some of my professors were younger than me, and yet they were great mentors for me. And yet at the same time, there are people who are much more experienced than me career-wise that I love having as mentors also, and kind of as like people to that idea of sponsors, you know, people who can kind of pull you up to where they are in powerful ways. So I think there's some experiential and age benefits to that. And then also in my program, we've had a peer coaching model, which is like a peer mentoring model. And necessarily one has to be older and one has to be younger because that's the way age works. And it's been a powerful push despite the age. So I think there's so many different ways to mentor and so many opportunities to learn from people of all ages. And thinking about if you're setting up something that's a structured mentoring program, thinking about what kinds of experiences are you trying to set up for people? What are the goals? You know, what do the mentees need out of it? So one mentee may really want that person who has that experience to look to and really a guide career-wise, where another might want that more of a peer coaching kind of push. That might be what they need in that space to feel safe to move forward. So there's a lot of different ways to do it, but I think age can be a real powerful thing too.
Thanks, Dr. Owens.
So I'm raising my hand for another bite at the apple.
Go ahead, Don.
Or do we have to move on? Okay.
No, not at all. Go ahead, Don.
The reason why this relationship with the millennial is working pretty well is because I really do need to learn from him because I want to develop a product that has life expectancy, shelf life. You know, if I develop a product now that is read by 65-year-olds, well, it's not going to have as much value as a product that's read by 25-year-olds or 35-year-olds because it will just have more value for a longer period of time. So I need to find out what millennials are looking for. And there's no better way to find out what millennials are looking for than to have a relationship with a millennial. And even if it might cost me something in terms of comfort or time or something like that, well, maybe it's worth it. And, you know, hopefully if he feels the same way, then we'll have a friendship that's mutually beneficial. So I think I'm done. Thank you.
Great. I love that reciprocal nature there. That's good.
Laurie?
This is interesting in listening to this because some of these questions sort of play off other things that you guys have said. We had someone come in who talked about the peer mentoring at another part of the University of Chicago. And while his ability to talk to us was very brief, this question came up there, which is, should the mentor-mentee relationship have a set duration, so it's decided beforehand, or should that be negotiated between the two of you as you go along? I'm going to start with Don, because you were talking about your relationship with the millennial and whether or not, how long that relationship goes on.
Sure. Okay. Well, I'll chime in on this. So we're learning as we go, but I'm a kind of crawl before you walk, before you run kind of guy. It's, you know, kind of incremental, because I like to control my risk. You know, I'm a heck of a risk taker, but I don't like to take a big risk right out of the box. I take a little risk, and then a medium risk, and then a big risk after I think have been convinced that taking the risk is justified. So to answer your question, we're using small projects in writing with deliverables, clearly specified in writing. And then once we keep our promises on little things, then for short projects, little things, then we'll move up to, you know, if all goes well, we'll move up to medium-sized projects with medium-term time frames. And then if that goes well, we'll work up to big projects on long time frames. So I'm kind of an incremental. I'm an incrementalist. Thank you for asking.
Marie?
Well, you know, it's interesting because I was thinking about the fact that I have never really participated in a formal mentor-mentee situation or program, aside from the, you know, the coaching program that I run myself, but for freelance medical writers. But you know, all of my mentor-mentee relationships sort of are pretty organic. They just happened. People either asked for my advice and then it kind of snowballed from there. So I really tend to be pretty open-ended about it. It either fizzles or we become friends. It's just one of the things. I should modify that. I have been a part of a couple of attempts to have a structured mentor-mentee relationship in a couple of different law firms, and they always fizzled just because people weren't really matched. You know, it's almost like you develop your own individual mentorship relationships just because these are the people that you work with, et cetera. And so these formalized, you know, let's go to lunch every other week kind of thing, and you can ask me anything, but on the other hand, you guys are the partners, and I'm not going to ask you about some other partner and create some kind of a political issue for myself, right? So those kind of formal situations just never worked in my experience, and it just not just for me, but just for the whole program. Those programs tended to kind of fizzle and not survive. But the informal ones, they're just, you know, they're ad hoc. And so they arise and then just keep on keeping on or not.
Tina?
Yeah, I read something recently on kind of drive-by mentoring, and I loved it. This idea that, like, these mentoring relationships that just happen, like it's something that happens and you can nurture that. But I do like when you have a more formal mentor, having some timelines for it and some commitments from the beginning that we'll meet, you know, once a month or every other week for 12 months. And this is what we'll do during that time, because it helps to create some habit. It makes it less uncomfortable. You know what to expect. And from there, it kind of develops into that more relationship, and you find that the conversations get a little easier, a little less tight, and then maybe sometimes you have to come back and pull them back to more of a protocol to help make sure that there's still mentoring happening out of it and not just casual conversation. And then at the end of the year, if there's space for that, deciding whether or not to commit to another year together. I think that just makes it easier for all people involved, with the idea that if this isn't working for us, we can agree to end it sooner. But I think having that commitment makes it, sometimes mentoring is the thing that we can put on the back burner because we're terrible about doing the things that are just for ourselves. And we can see mentoring as just something as a plus, as a almost a self-care kind of thing. So it's easy to skip it or say, I can't make it today. But if you have some of those commitments to say you're committing to yourself, you're committing to your mentor, you're committing to that time together, it helps everybody to keep it on the forefront and really hold it as important.
Mary?
Those are really excellent comments. And Dr. Owens, I think you do allude to something that I think the mentee is sometimes shy about taking the time of this expert. And so in a way, setting up appointments takes that shyness away from the mentee so he doesn't feel as if he's taking advantage. And I think that's always something that people new in the professions always feel. So I'm going to start with this question. What are tips for new mentees in that first meeting? So Don, I'm going to start with you. When you, I know people approach you for teaching and mentorship all the time because you speak so often and teach so often regionally and nationally. What tips would you give for a new mentee to approach that mentor and maybe some good practices?
Well, I guess I like what Dr. Owen Moore said about reciprocity. Gosh, that's a great question. I think well, there's a certain amount of maybe it's ego, maybe it's pride. I think I want to know some sign that he or she has read what I have written already. In other words, if the topic is, trends affecting CME writing, for example, or developing expertise, or let me see, opportunities at medical education companies, and if they're asking me questions that I've already written, asking me questions that I've already answered in writing, it's a little embarrassing to have to go back over and say, well, yes, as you may have seen in where I've written here. I think to have read if the person has a published record, to have familiarized yourself with what the person has already written, I think is a very good first step, as opposed to just coming in blind and figuring out you'll ask or find out everything directly from the horse's mouth when you speak to the person. I think to read what the person has previously written, I think is a very good first step.
Don. Maria, do you have any tips for people when they're approaching you for mentorship?
Yeah, for me, it's not as important that they read my my life's work and all of my Medium posts. It's, obviously they've approached me because for some reason they think that I can help them in their professional development. So to me, the more useful approach is when the person knows what they're trying to do, and they don't necessarily need to have a list of questions, etc., but at least have a goal in mind and spend some time thinking about how I may help you or what it is that you want from me. Because, coming in and basically saying something like, things aren't working for me, help. It's open-ended, right? But even if you say something like, I hate my job and you've changed careers twice, and can you give me some tips about that? Even that is a little bit more of a directed approach. So to me, the cleaner you are and the more specific you are about what it is that I can do to help you, I think the more productive our conversation is going to be.
I think that's super. Dr. Owen Moore, please first allow me to apologize. I'm a little nervous, so I'm sorry. I was using your name incorrectly. Dr. Owen Moore, what are your tips for new mentees in that first meeting?
Yeah, thank you. And it's no problem at all. I think most importantly, first ask yourself, do you want to be mentored? Right? So mentoring means like really being open to listening, to learning, like really hungry to learn, to grow and change. That might mean sometimes like hearing the hard things. That might mean sometimes disagreeing, and that's okay, but being really open to learning, and not just being in the space with that person, but really, both learning from it and being willing to share and create that reciprocal relationship also. I think saying thank you is really important, and being grateful for that time. I think realizing that time is very precious. And especially every one of us, and they are like, our mentees are too. It's like everybody's working so hard and has a lot going on. So time is precious. So really taking care of that and coming prepared, being there, holding to the commitments, and being, grateful, saying thank you for that time goes a long way, because it really shows the value to the mentor also. Yeah, I think those are the big things for me.
I think those are really all super comments, and I think will really help people beginning a mentorship relationship as a mentee.
Can I pipe up one more bite at that apple? I found that informational interviews can work really, really well. Earlier on in my career, I conducted a whole bunch of informational interviews before making my career switch, my career transition. And now I'm starting to be asked to give informational interviews to other people who are thinking about making that career switch. And that is approaching the mentor relationship. The thing is, though, an informational interview really is a one and done type thing. It doesn't necessarily end up being a long-term mentoring relationship. I suppose it could, if a relationship develops. But I think in that informational interview, there are tips for how to conduct a good informational interview. And I would definitely recommend that to someone who is trying to make a career change, is to begin conducting 2 or 3 informational interviews to try to find people who are doing something very similar to what you hope to be doing, and simply ask them, how did you get where you are today? What brought you there? What special training? What special certification or whatever? And what do you like about it? And what do you hate about it? And what do you find frustrating? Because it's really good to know, the cons going in before you find yourself there and difficult in that same situation, and being unprepared for the frustrations. Because every job has frustrations that go with the satisfactions. So I think I'm done. Thank you.
Thank you.
Back to you, Laurie.
This is an interesting question, because I think about the idea of interviews. I think about the idea of the first time you go to a medical professional. What should a new mentor expect to discuss with their new mentee expect to discuss with their mentor in that initial meeting? What should that look like in your view? What would be the most productive? Most of us tend to not necessarily come into a mentor relationship understanding fully what can happen. I can have a set of goals. The first time I worked with a mentor, I came in with a list of questions as though I was interviewing her, and I'd already selected her. We'd already had a conversation, but I came there with like a set of goals, and she said, why don't we just talk first? And I was like, talk? I'm not prepared to talk. I have a set things I'm gonna say. So let's just start with Marie. What would you say you'd like your mentee to come to that first discussion with, what the expectations are, how you'd like that to feel and look?
So I think it depends, right? If we're talking about a coaching situation, so this is a formal situation where, where the person has paid a fee for me to basically professionally mentor them, that tends to be a pretty formalized situation, right? They know how many sessions it's going to be, they know how long it's going to be, And in general, we've had a call beforehand and we talk through about the process, how each call is going to go, what kind of materials I may be providing to them, and maybe I want to for them to read before the first call, etc. If it's a more informal mentoring relationship, I'm all about that initial conversation without preconditions, because we really do need to start building a relationship. And we need to do that as a coach as well. But in a mentoring situation where it's a lot more fluid, I just want to have that first conversation and talk about the goals and talk about where we're going to go together and how much time we're going to be spending on this, and what kind of help are we looking at. Some people have come to me and asked for me to actually review what they've written and edit it, right? That can happen. On the other hand, they came to me and said, I'm really having a really, really, really hard time with this one partner, and can you talk to me about how maybe to resolve that situation? And so we had that conversation. So that's why I say that it really, really depends. In terms of the kind of coaching that I do a lot of business development coaching. So that's a very, like, marketing coaching. So that's a very clear, precise, it's almost like having a tutor, right? That kind of relationship in that coaching world. But in terms of just, as I said, like the mentoring situation, it's, I'm all about that first conversation just being a conversation.
Great. And Don?
Well, I'm sorry, my mind wandered. Can you repeat the question?
The question is your expectation of what that first meeting with the mentee, what they should expect, what they should bring to the table, what you would like that time, that very first time you actually meet, not the initial match set, but the first time you meet, what you want them to come with, not just necessarily with all of their paperwork and saying I've read everything, but what's that initial first date feel like?
Well, I'm going to copy my new role model, Maria Granovsky, who is on this call, because I'm going to say what I thought she was going to say. Because I really like when she talked about the bias for action. I think, and how the mentor is going to help you do something that you might not be able to do on your own or have the courage to do on your own. So I want to hear the mentee say something that they want to do, some action, some growth step, some step forward that they want to take. And then we'll figure out whether I can help them or not, because there's no guarantee that I'll be able to help them, but maybe I can. Maybe if we think creatively and, put our thinking caps on, we can figure out a way that I can help that person do the thing, take the action that he or she wants to do.
Excellent. Tina?
I think my bias is towards like having some kind of protocol in place or something. I think it takes some of the stress out of the first meeting all the time, like any group when you're coming together, having some set of things that you send out in advance that says how it's going to happen. And I think the mentor really has to take the lead in this because of the power dynamics that often happen with a mentee-mentor relationship. So for a mentee situation, what I would likely do is send out a series of getting to know you questions ahead of time and say, okay, during our time together, we're going to have a casual lunch, but we're also going to answer these questions just to get to know each other a little bit better. If there are any questions that you want off the list, just let me know ahead of time and we'll go from there. Or, have a series of questions in a bowl where we can pick one, each person picks one and then answer the question and with the right to pass. Just something kind of scripted that makes it light and fun and getting to know you. And then from there, we can find out, all right, do we have that rapport well enough with each other that this feels like the right way to go about mentee relationship? And can some of those questions be around goals and hopes and things like that also?
I do want to say one thing, which is I am so appreciative of you guys right now, because as I think about how we can use what you're saying to set up something at the Graham Center, I like the various ideas you guys present, because I think to myself, I've never thought about all of that. My approach is such that I only know what I know. And so this has been an absolute delight. I just want to say that. Mary?
I echo exactly what Laurie just said. This has just been fascinating and mind-opening for me. And I've served as a mentor many, many times in my life, and I kind of wish I'd met you all earlier. I'm going to start with what are good strategies for accountability, measuring progress towards goals? I'm going to start with Maria.
So we've done different things. So at Bright and Prosper, we have for a while tried to send out an email every Monday and say, you promised to do X, have you done X? And for about 6 months, that worked pretty well. And then people stopped responding because we realized that they were getting shy about, not actually doing X or half X or quarter X. So we stopped doing that. But we have also explored incentivizing people, like literally bribing them to do their homework. So there is actually, so the way we run that particular coaching is we have a call every other week and an action step. And then if you submit the homework that shows that you've done the action step, you're eligible for a drawing for a prize. That works really well. People actually, even adults, respond really well to $25 gift certificates from Amazon. So that works. And, I've heard different ways. I've heard people talk about, coaches holding onto a check from their mentees, and if you don't do what you're supposed to do, they'll mail it to the party that you hate, for example, or, if you're like a totally anti-gun person, they'll send it to the NRA, so that, it's whatever makes people work. But frankly, at the end of the day, it's about, I think, showing up. I think what I've noticed is, if you have that ongoing check-in, right, every 2 weeks or every week, whatever the frequency is, showing up and facing your mentor or your coach and not having done it, that's where I think for most people that is really the accountability. It's tough, right? I think we're all conditioned to not renege on our promises. So I know for myself, when I'm like, it's 3 a.m. the day before I'm supposed to have a call with my coach, and there I am doing the thing that I promised to do because, oh my God, I have to face this person, and I didn't do it. But ever so often, right? I mean, at the end of the day, if the mentee's anxiety is so high about whatever it is that they promised to do, no amount of accountability, including sending the check to the NRA, is going to help, right? I mean, they just won't do it. And that's where sometimes what it takes is a recalibration. It's like, okay, so maybe that goal is really, let's talk about it. So that's what I've noticed with some of my clients where, like for example, this one person, business development, she's like, yeah, I want to join these associations and I'm going to become a fixture at these associations, et cetera. And then 2 weeks later, she hasn't joined. A month later, she hasn't joined, 2 months later. And I'm like, do you really want to join the association? She's like, no, but this is what I felt like I should be doing because that's how marketing is. And it's like, that's not how marketing is. We can do it different ways. But obviously, this is not going to work for you because it's been 2 months of you telling me you're going to join associations, right? So I think that's where being sensitive to your mentee really comes in, because accountability is great until it isn't. Like once you've hit that anxiety point, that's where you need to be sensitive enough to kind of say, okay, something here is an issue and we need to address that and we need to fix it.
Thanks, Maria. Dr. Owen Moore, what are your thoughts about good strategies for accountability? You touched on that a little bit earlier, but in more detail, measuring progress towards goals.
Yeah. So my most recent coaching work has been with the Immunity to Change framework, and Robert Keegan and Lisa Leahy give examples of how like a ridiculous percentage of like 90% of patients who are told that they will die within 6 months if they don't make specific changes to their life, don't make those changes. Like change is really, really hard for people. And their work really digs into the core of why it's so hard for people to make changes and improvements in their practice. And so often when you start to uncover like what it is that's holding people back, it's because whatever that behavior is also a real talent of theirs or shows up as a survival thing in a lot of other contexts. And they're applying the same principles and practices to all these different spaces. So using that approach, it's really exciting to see people be able to start to tear that apart and be able to apply it when they want to. So when I'm doing the coaching with people and we're setting goals for improvement, we talk about what will that look like? How will you know that you've been successful? Where will you get the evidence for that? So, you know, if somebody is working on, they want to be perceived as a more confident speaker. Well, how are you going to get that feedback about your public speaking? You know, are you going to speak somewhere? Are you going to ask people to rate you? Are you going to ask people to give you comments? Like, how are you going to compare it to where you are now? And so I help them to think about what it will look like if they're successful at meeting their goal and how they'll measure that at the end. And it really makes them think concretely about what that success would look like. I think in the context of mentoring, it can be very similar to really think about if this is the goal that you have for yourself, what are the steps towards that goal that would look like success to you? And how can we measure that?
Thanks, Dr. Owen Moore. That's really fantastic. And Don, what are your strategies for accountability with your mentees and measuring progress towards goals?
Well, it's funny you should ask. I just finished co-facilitating a leadership study group that we read the book and kind of tried to get our mind around the behavior changes, the advice for behavior change in the fall, and then began to make our New Year's resolutions for behavior changes were we going to start around the beginning of the new year. And so now I have, since I'm seen as the facilitator or one of the leaders of the group, I have 7 or 8 adults who are reporting to me about their New Year's resolutions and how they're doing on keeping their New Year's resolutions. And so over there I have, you know, as I said, half a dozen behavior change from goals from adults, and they're reporting to me. We had our first check-in last week, and then we're going to have another check-in in about 5 weeks from now to see how they're doing toward changing their habits. And so each habit change has 4 components to it. There's the goals. What is the goal? What are you trying to achieve? What new habit will you try to develop? What schedule will that habit be on? Will it be a daily habit, twice a day, once a week, 3 times a week, once a month? How frequently? The schedule. And then the fourth and probably most important piece is the scorecard. What scorecard can you come up with that will help you keep track of progress toward goal? I really like dry erase whiteboards. I like, dry erase paper, and I have dry erase markers, and I have 6 or 7 dry erase scorecards around my office because they're very easy to, when you're developing your scorecard, it's easy to get the scale wrong or the frequency wrong or something like that. So if it's dry erase, you just, erase it all and start all over again. But other people use apps. A lot of people in the group are using apps like Coach Me or Fabulous or a number of other apps that I'm just beginning to learn how to use. And I think, you know, the smartphone app has a lot of applicability here and potential for being able to hold ourselves accountable to the goals that we set for ourselves. So I'm not sure if that answers your question. If not, I'll try again.
No, I think that really does answer my question. And frankly, I'm learning so much just from listening to our three presenters, and I'm certain our audiences as well. Back to you, Laurie.
This question is a little, I'm going to frame this question a little differently than how it was, because some of it you've already answered, which is the type of follow-up that a mentee should have with a mentor. And what I'm going to ask is the way in which the follow-up occurs driven by you as the mentor or driven by the mentee? And I'll give you the easy example. I have certain people who I work with who get everything in an email. I have certain people who I work with who want to have a form filled out and sent to them. I have other people that want to do a quick casual text or conversation. I, as an EA, am conscious of who does what with how. So I'm constantly adapting myself to the person I'm working with. As a mentor, is your expectation that you will meet them where they are, or they will meet what you set up as a protocol? And I'm going to start with Don because he's looking at me.
Wow, that was a zinger of a question. I was trying to follow you there. Is it the expectation that the mentor will meet where the mentee is in terms of their communication needs, or vice versa?
Yes, exactly.
Okay. I think, you know, I don't know, maybe I'm old school. I think it's the mentor needs to set an example, needs to lead an example, and needs to kind of set a minimum expectation. Recently, I had a conversation with a mentee that was quite wide-ranging on the topic of the elements of a successful apprenticeship program, because I wanted to set up an apprenticeship program that isn't imposed from above, but on the other end isn't unbalanced from the perspective from below as well. So to try to meet in the middle somehow. So we had a wide-ranging talk over the better part of an hour about the components of a successful apprenticeship program from the perspective of the company, the sponsor company, but also successful from the perspective of the apprentice. And so after we talked, well, first of all, I sent him 6 or 7 key talking points to discuss in advance, a week in advance, that we were going to talk about on this phone call. And we talked about them. And then after the phone call, I followed up with what I thought I heard him say. Mm-hmm. This was to facilitate accurate communication. You know, what I think I heard you say, and am I correct? And furthermore, if there's anything else you would like to add, could you please add it to this email? And then between what I've written and what you write, we're going to have a pretty good record of what we talked about on this phone call. And he cooperated. I don't think he would have done that without me setting the example or setting the expectation, but he did. And so we, you know, I have, you know, an email that's this long from me about what we talk about, what I heard him say. And then there's another email that's, you know, equally long about yes. And in fact, not only that, but this and this and this and this. And so we have a really good record of our conversation that we'll be able to refer to in 6 months or a year when we're ready to take the next step. Does that answer your question?
Absolutely, absolutely.
Okay, all right, yay, glad to hear that.
Marie?
For me, it's usually the communication style is set out in that first conversation, and we usually have a pretty standard protocol. And the way I tend to work with people is, you know, we have set times for calls or Zoom, or, you know, I'm pretty flexible on what technology we're going to use, whatever works for them. And then they can ping me with email whenever they need to ask a quick question etc. And that seems to work really well. People don't seem to abuse that system at all. In fact, ever so often, I kind of wonder if they're too shy and not use it as much as they could. And it seems like setting up some kind of a schedule of like, an hour every 2 weeks or an hour every week, depending on what we're working on. That tends to be a good way of, having enough time to discuss what's happened, where we're at, what we're doing, what the person is going to do next week or the next 2 weeks, and then move on from there. I don't have a system where we actually do that structured, here's what we discussed situation. Some calls, if the mentee wants, if we're on Zoom, for example, we'll record it, and so they have that record. But generally, I don't know. I guess I'm much more of an ad hoc kind of person. So.
Yeah, I was thinking about how with my different coaching and coachees, how different each person has been in that communication style. I try to follow up with each conversation with some kind of feedback about what I heard or what we agreed to or what I'm looking forward to in the next thing. And different people have had real, different things that they're hungry for from it. So one coachee, he really loved research. So anytime I could send him an example of research or something from research that kind of doubled down on the conversation we had talked about, he was really eager for that. He loved getting that. And then I had another coachee who I tend to draw things as I'm talking, and she would just love to take a picture of my drawing and keep it, or have me send that to her, or on the whiteboard. So different people needed different things. And then another person who just needed me to tell them what we had said, what she had committed to, and when we were going to get back together. And so each person has been different, but I try to follow up each conversation. And I think it has to come from the mentor perspective, again, because of the power dynamics and the relationship. But when a mentee can say, or a coachee can say, here are some of the things that I heard from you or that I took away, and say, thank you for these insights, or this is something I'm going to be thinking about this week. I think that's really powerful in that reciprocity and helping me to also know what they might need from me in the next time. Hearing the kinds of things that they're taking away helps me to be better in the next sessions as well.
Mary, I've been watching the time and I want to be conscious of everybody's time. So do you want to select a final question?
Yeah, Laurie, we're both really in the same mindset. I thought I would combine the last two because they really are somewhat similar. So I'm going to start with Don. Don, based on your experience mentoring, what are best practices and examples of mistakes that should be avoided?
Ooh. You sure you don't want to pick on Maria first? Mistakes that should be avoided. Well, I feel like I'm a tenderfoot mentor. I have to be honest with you. I was just doing all this research before this call on, there is a whole literature out there on mentoring and how to be a good mentor. And, I've never taken any of these mentor training courses that people are talking about. And I think Dr. Owen Moore here is way, way more advanced. I'd like to come back to that. Will you let me come back to that? Because I'd like to hear what some of the other people have to say on that one.
Absolutely, Don. Maria, based on your experience mentoring, what do you consider best practices and mistakes that should be avoided?
So best practices, I would say, is, well, there are several things. One is that you really listen to the mentee and you understand where they're trying to go, what they're trying to achieve. And if you're not clear on that, keep on asking, because otherwise your advice may actually send them in a very different direction than where they wanted to end up. Don't assume Don't assume that you understand their motivation. Don't assume that you understand their anxiety. Don't assume that you understand their resistance to change, their fears. Basically, I think a lot of it is put on your researcher's hat in a way. It's just really learn about your mentee and where they're at and where they're trying to go. The other thing that I would say, as far as mistakes go, this has happened to me, not on the mentor side, but on the mentee side, where someone gave me advice that I was like, yeah, this does not sound very good, but because that person was a mentor, I took their advice. I almost lost my job. You know, it's like, don't venture outside of your expertise, really. Just because you think something might work, or you know, it sounds like it should be right, don't do that. You know, if you don't know, just say you don't know, or suggest somebody. You know, I mean, I've referred people to other people because, you know, this is not my bailiwick. This is what I know, and this stuff I don't know. Mm-hmm. So I think being humble about what it is that your expertise is really good practice for mentors. Yeah, I'm sure other people have other things to say too.
Oh, I think that actually resonates with me very much, Maria, because I remember having a mentor give me advice towards a patient, and my gut was, it's not right for that patient. And I followed the advice, and it was not therapeutic. So that's sort of a more specific clinical example. Dr. Owen Moore, based on your experience, what are examples of mistakes that should be avoided or best practices?
Yeah, thank you. Some of these are going to be similar, but one, if you invite somebody to lunch, pay for it. But beyond that, don't tell people what to do. I think you have to really be a master of questions when it comes to being a mentor or being a coach, like really just asking questions. And I think about in restorative justice or restorative practices, there's this practice when you're sitting in the circle of not planning what you're going to say while the other person is talking, like really being present and listening deeply, and then asking more questions. Is a really powerful practice that I think everybody can sit with and really work on, even outside of mentoring relationships. And then don't listen for a solution. Like you really have to be in that space and trust that they have the solution. They know the context best. They know, you know, they know themselves best. They know the people who are around them. So really just asking the questions that can help them get to the place that they need to get to make the decisions that they need to make at the end of it. And enjoy the time together. I think it can be a really, really joyful experience for both people and really exciting as you move forward. So enjoy it.
Those are wonderful suggestions, Dr. Owen Moore. And Don?
Well, so now that I've had a little bit of time to think, thank you very much. Yeah, I try to inject a little bit of fun in there, the F-U-N. I think my millennial mentee has really warmed to that prospect of, you know, what can we do together that's fun, that we enjoy. Turns out we both enjoy teaching, which is kind of cool. So I think that if we're able to teach together, we'll enjoy that together. So look for things that you both enjoy and make sure you make some time for that. And then lastly, make time for celebration. I think that argues a little bit toward having the defined period or term for the relationship, because if you do have that defined term, you can say, okay, we made it. We did it for 6 months. You know, let's celebrate and then decide if we're going to continue on or not. But certainly make time for celebration. I think I'm done. Thank you.
Well, I personally would like to thank all three of you. It's been an absolute pleasure. I'd like to thank Mary for alternating questions with me. I hope you will come back and look at the video and find new thoughts. I'm sure I was going to go back and peel through the video myself because I took notes, and I'm going to have to go back and hear even more because sometimes when you take notes, you don't get to hear everything. I'd like to send it back over to Carrie.
Yeah, thank you everybody for attending. Thank you to our speakers for all of their wisdom that they've shared with us. I will be sending out a recording of this webinar tomorrow. So there'll be some more information to follow, but a sincere thank you to everyone. I think this will be of great interest to our students.
You're very welcome.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
for all
Thank
of
you very much. Thank you for the invitation to be part of this.
Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you.
Good night.
Good night.
Bye.